everyone, Tony D with another hot take. So, I don't know what to call this. I'll come up with a title later. So the creative drive that leads people to make, well, terrible movies, terrible TV shows, terrible comics, right? I've been seeing all these videos, and they just excoriate these terrible, terrible TV shows and movies that have been overcome by ideology. Why? Why are they being overcome like this, and why haven't they stopped? So, in the old system, you would hire a bunch of talent, they would make movies and TV shows, and then you would take the movies and TV shows or comics that made money, you would elevate them, and the rest you would cancel or push back, and then, you know, keep that pattern. Like you'd get rid of the movies and TV shows that weren't making money and the comics, and you would elevate the other ones. That was the old system. And under that system, sometimes creatively bad things would make tons of money. We've seen plenty of those. And sometimes really good TV shows, movies, and comics, video games, would just not make any money and get canceled. And people would be like, ooh. It was frustrating, but it made sense from a business perspective, because businesses are about math. When you talk about the business end of these creative endeavors, you're talking about a can of peas. This is my can of peas theory. I guess I'll call it that, my can of peas theory. So the can of peas theory is you could only do so much with a can of peas, right? You could add a little salt, you could put a different label on it, but ultimately it's just a can of peas. Movies, TV shows, comics, video games, they're not just a can of peas. They are different. Each one is a little different, or a lot of different, really. And so you can't sell them the same way. Or can you? What I'm seeing now is a push, and it's sort of a natural push from the business end of these corporations to be able to sell something regardless of its quality, right? Now, at some point, these studios started to attempt to micromanage down to the actual project. So the example I always use is Steven Seagal actually had in his contract that he had to, kick a guy in the head, that he had to fall in love with a beautiful woman, and in each movie he had to have 3 karate fights or whatever. Like, there would be an actual list of events that happened in his movies that would be in his contract, and the distributor would want those events in every movie because they knew they could sell that movie, even if it was, whether it was a creative writer and director who used those scenes in a creative way, or whether it was a total hack who butchered the movie but still included those important scenes, they could still make enough money to make a profit. So, sort of under that concept, I think the corporations are moving forward with this. So, let's say and I'll use round numbers. Let's say you can make a movie for $1 million. You want to make at least $2 million in profit to kind of justify, right? So, if you get investors to give you $20 million, you can make 20 movies. In the old days, you would hope that one of those 20 movies would be a hit. Some of them would be flops. And, and you'd hope you'd make a good amount of money, that you'd show a profit. It would be a bunch of weird numbers. But what if you could say to the investors, if you give us $20 million, we'll guarantee you $40 million. That's way more impressive to investors, right? I think the way they're attempting to do this, and have done this to a certain point, is they are using marketing to the point at which they can almost guarantee at least profitability. So if you look like a movie like the Justice League, right? They budgeted in, reshoots. Oh, try not to sneeze. Major reshoots were budgeted in to Justice League. And it didn't prevent them from making, say, a bad movie, but it prevents them from making a movie that will lose money. It prevents them, and with the testing, audience testing, it prevents them from, turning their $100 million movie into a total flop. Instead, they get a movie that kind of is safe enough or competent enough that it limps to an acceptable level of box office where they don't lose money. Right? So, on a smaller scale, if you can make that work, right? So say your marketing is so good. It doesn't matter, even if the director delivers a piece of crap movie, a movie that the studio knows is terrible. As long as they produced it for X amount of dollars, in this case $1 million, they know that because of their business model, because of their previous record, because of their distribution, because they essentially force, not force, but push all the movies onto their theaters and distributors at once, right? You say, well, you can't just take one of my movies. You can't pick and choose. You got to take them all. Like that's the deal. So under that model, they essentially can guarantee that even a horrible, horrible movie will make its money back and a small profit. This case being $1 million. Again, round numbers. So in that case, you're never losing money, which is what business people want to do, right? They never want to lose money. Then all they have to do is hope one of their 20 movies is a hit and makes more than $1 million. And a handful of them will make $5 million. But one of them is going to make $100 million, maybe, or 50, or whatever. And then that movie is going to really have their profit margin up. So if you can but if you come back to it in a minute, if you're going to produce 20 movies a year under that formula, you kind of don't care what's in the movie as long as it's a movie, right? So here comes this trend, this wokeness trend that's on Twitter, and people babble about it because people in Hollywood, mostly, and this is mostly the people in that world, are on Twitter. It's a thing to be on. Celebrities are on it. Ergo, you're on it. It's something a lot of people use. Now, only 2% of the population really use it and look at it, but that number doesn't matter to most people in LA because the important people are on it. The journalists, the celebrities. So that pushes, and those people are all pushing that same trend. They're all pushing that wokeness trend that this is the ultimate. This is the greatest thing ever. Yes, intersectional feminism. My God, have you not heard of it? It's a wonderful thing that encompasses all things. And down with patriarchy and down with Trump and blah, blah, blah. And, but it's kind of not that popular, right? And it kind of sucks. And it kind of ruins things like certain video games, one that just came out, a sequel to another game, right? It just hammers home these ideologies. But it doesn't matter because it's already been built into the formula before they even started to shoot frame one that they're going to make their money back. TV is a lot like that. With cartoons, it's kind of a loss leader, but most TV shows, they sell the whole season, They've already got it all planned out. They've got their sponsors, and then the affiliates get their sponsors, and as long as everybody's making money, nobody really cares about the quality of the show. They are able to package these shows, these movies, these video games, these comic books in such a way that they're always making money somehow. At least enough profit to justify their existence. Now, in the case of comics, it's so low, the profit margin's probably nowhere. The profit on Marvel and DC comics at this point, who knows where they are in terms of actually making money. They probably don't care about the actual printed comic books because the merchandise and everything else that comes out of it makes so much more. Like, who cares? Who cares? The overhead on printing comics is comparatively so low as compared to a movie, a video game, a TV show, even T-shirts. They don't care. So that's an exception. But video games, movies, TV shows, they're big productions. They have real cost. You have to make money on these things. You can't afford to make zero money on a television show. You can't afford to make zero money on a movie. It just, you could if you're a big studio, but the optics are bad. It taints your brand. So as long as you can keep the cost down, your marketing team does the rest. So the reason why all these projects are so ideologically driven is because, partly, that they have figured out a way to polish a turd. They have figured out a way to guarantee a can of peas. That, they're turning movies, television, and video games, all these entertainment things, they're turning into a product like a can of peas. That they can guarantee profit, number one. That they can guarantee enough quality that it works, I mean, look, I think Batwoman is like the worst TV show I've ever seen. But there is a certain level of quality to it, right? There's a name actress as the lead, a couple of minor names in the supporting roles. You've got colorful sets. You've got, beginning, middle, and end to every episode. It follows the formula. I mean, it's not incompetent work. It's just from a creative standpoint, nobody really wants to, in my view, watch this show. Very few people do. So if you can make a show like that still profitable, there's no reason not to renew it because you've already got the mechanism set in place. And if you can squeak by to a fifth season, you can, release some sort of DVD or move some seasons into Netflix, make some money there. As long as you're making money, it doesn't matter. So these trends don't matter. So that's kind of why you've got this woke trend. And that's kind of why it's going to just abruptly end. When it finally does end. It'll end because the trend's no good. Not because it's not making money, but because the people involved with the trend will have moved on to something else. Trends can't last forever. This has happened time and time again, this sort of woke trend, and it's come in different forms. Usually it starts with some sort of moral panic about this element of culture or that element of culture, one that's actually cool, like rap music was one of them in the 90s. Like Public Enemy was putting out stuff, and Time magazine was translating their lyrics and telling you what they mean and being very ominous about some of the implications. And then at some point it just stopped. It just stopped. At one point people were petrified of Public Enemy and their lyrics and people listening to them, and then just as suddenly like they weren't even in the news. They were old news, and it was 5 years later, and people were on to talking about something else. That's what's going to happen to this woke trend. That's what 5 years from now. You got to picture 5 years down the road, 2025. Trump's out of office. And all these trends of hammering in marginalized groups into everything and politicizing everything is just done. It's just done. People have been sick. People are sick to death of it. So even the people doing this stuff are sick of it. Even they have moved on. I was just watching The Critical Drinker analyze Westworld, which is another show that's just been ruined by wokeness, from what he says and a lot of other people. I always thought the show was a dumb idea anyway. It wasn't a sustainable series concept, but why was the first season good and then everything else just gets destroyed? It's because the first season percolated during the time prior to the wokeness, when wokeness wasn't a trend. So they were following the old trends, which were more on point with what most audiences want. It was about getting the broadest audience possible. It was about making a good show, whatever. Then the wokeness hits, and it's like, no, we have to suborn everything to the wokeness, because that's the new trend, and that's what everybody in power wants. That's what all the money people want, because they see that as a trend. The moment the money people don't see that as a trend anymore, they will put out the order. Don't do woke stuff anymore. That's dead. That's yesterday's news. Part of it will be that most of the people calling the shots will be out of their position. That is a natural trend. They retire, they move on to other things, or the investors are just, sick of them losing money. And some of that, it may or may not happen to a company like Disney, right? They may get sick of losing money. However, the wokeness may be extended to some degree because of the virus, and they could just blame it on that for a while, and they get like another year or two reprieve before people go, okay, it wasn't just a virus. So it's coming to an end at some point. I can't predict when, but I will predict that it will be abrupt. And it could have already happened, because there's always a delayed effect, but there has to be the new trend before you can end the old trend. And I don't know what the new trend is. I always say it's going to be the anti-wokeness trend. It's going to be to, turn it on its ear. And now it's going to be about, hey, let's be edgy. Let's tease those marginalized groups a little bit, and let's play with this all this meme stuff. Let's get a little dangerous, which I think, and obviously I have an optimism bias there. I'm hoping that's going to be the trend, but we will see. Anyhow, that's my rant. Check out my books, Wokistan, a Novel, and The Pineys at Amazon.